I was a simple shepherd of humble origins and unwavering faith until the day I was anointed king of Israel, thereby confronting the current king in question. In this video, you will discover how I managed to pass through the trial of facing a giant feared by all, got involved with the wrong women, faced the wrath and jealousy of the king of Israel, becoming one of the greatest kings in the Bible, and how you can also face your adversities. My name is David, and this is my story. Just imagine, I was born and raised in the simplicity of Bethlehem, son of Jesse. From a young age, I knew that life had something special reserved for me, something beyond the ordinary. Growing up, I spent my youth under the open sky, in the fields, taking care of my father's sheep. To many, this might seem like just another job, but for me, it was my passion, my calling. It was there, in the midst of nature, facing daily challenges, that I felt at home. I not only protected the flock from dangers such as lions and bears, yes, you heard right, lions and bears, but I also learned valuable lessons about courage and trust. I had this certainty in my heart that I was being guided by something greater, something divine. Now imagine the scene. A beautiful sunset in Bethlehem, the sky painted orange and gold, and suddenly, an unexpected visit changes everything. The prophet Samuel, sent by God, arrives with a special mission. Among the sons of Jesse, it was I, the youngest, who caught his attention. Not for my physical strength or appearance, but for something much deeper, my heart. The news came in such a subtle way, a whisper of the wind among the leaves, calling me home. My heart? Oh, it was racing, a crazy mix of excitement and the kind of nervousness that grips you. And when I arrived, man, there was this guy there who filled the space with a presence. How can I say? Commanding. It was Samuel, the prophet, famous throughout Israel for his unique connection with the Lord. His visit was a mystery to me, the youngest of 8 brothers, more accustomed to sheep than any social protocol. My family received Samuel with all honors, but you could cut the tension in the air with a knife. And then he drops the bomb. He came to anoint the next king of Israel, and guess what? The chosen one was one of us, Jesse's sons. One by one, my brothers went up, presenting themselves, each one more confident than the last. But none was the chosen one. You could see the confusion on everyone's faces. Until Samuel asks, "Are these all your sons?" And from the back, my father remembers me, the last in line who was out in the field, probably chasing after some lost sheep. When I entered, I swear, the looks I received were a mix of, "Who is this guy?" and "It can't be." But Samuel, oh, he had a different look, as if he saw something in me that no one else did. And without saying a word, he poured the oil over my head, anointing me right there, in front of everyone, who were about to fall over from shock. It's kind of surreal when you live a moment that literally ignites your heart. One of those moments that marks you so deeply it feels like everything changes in your life. There I was, with this crazy mix of fear and joy, feeling as if a divine fire was burning within me. And then Samuel, with a voice that echoed not just through the house but within my own soul, declares, "This is the Lord's chosen one." Those words not only sealed my fate but completely transformed who I was. From a simple shepherd to an anointed leader, tasked with the colossal mission of guiding Israel. That day, I realized that God's ways are indeed enigmatic. He chooses the least obvious to carry out his will. And suddenly, my life was not just my own. It had become this mission to serve, to lead, all under the direction of someone who sees far beyond what we can. Returning to the fields after that, it was a huge struggle. Everything seemed the same, but I was different. I now carried not just a weight on my shoulders but a promise. A future full of challenges, victories, but also pain and glory. I was the anointed David, destined to be king of Israel, following the paths that God was unfolding before me. Even with all this, I continued doing the usual, tending to the sheep, creating music, playing my harp. But something inside me had changed. A flame had been lit, fueled by faith and the promise that something grand was reserved for me. Things that, at that moment, I could barely begin to understand. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I stayed there, reflecting on all of it under the same Bethlehem sky. Despite still being that same David, son of Jesse, the shepherd of sheep, I knew a new story was being written for me. A story that, with faith and courage, I was destined to live. Then, something incredible happened. I've always had this thing with music, playing my harp out in the fields under that Bethlehem sky that seems like it's straight out of a painting. And wouldn't you know it, my musical abilities started to gain fame? Yes, my music spread through the fields and valleys and reached the ears of someone I least expected. The court of King Saul. The situation there was tense. King Saul was going through a really tough time, tormented by a spirit that left everything around somewhat under a heavy cloud. His advisors, wanting to help in some way, suggested bringing in a musician who could, through art, bring some relief to that charged atmosphere. And who would have thought my name came up as a recommendation? One of the king's servants, who by chance had heard my melodies, thrust me into this new adventure. Think about the situation. Me, who had been secretly anointed to be the next king, was now on my way to serve the very man I would succeed. Arriving at the court was a mix of emotions. Everyone looked at me with a curiosity that bordered on expectation. And there I was, in the middle of it all with my heart racing, ready to play for the king. My hand, already well acquainted with the strings of the harp, now had a dual mission, to bring music and, perhaps, a bit of healing. And wouldn't you know it, the moment the first notes played, you could feel the atmosphere changing? Music has this magical power, doesn't it? Suddenly, the heavy environment started to lighten, and King Saul's expression, previously laden with tension, began to soften. It was as if each chord I played was taking a bit of that pain away, replacing the turmoil with a peace that seemed almost tangible. The music ended up building an invisible bridge between me and King Saul. And, believe it or not, this connection wasn't something superficial. It was deep and unexpected. My presence in the court became routine, and over time we built a solid trust relationship. I wasn't just the music guy. I became a kind of companion for the king, a light on his darkest days. This season with Saul, despite all the challenges and uncertainties, was crucial. It shaped me not just as a musician but as a leader. It was like a boot camp for the complex challenges that were still to come. A journey with its highs and lows, its harmonies and dissonances, kind of like the music I played. And I, David, the shepherd, the musician, the anointed, found myself increasingly intertwined with the fate of Israel. While I was there, serving in Saul's court, news began to arrive of a new challenge. Goliath. The guy was a giant who was there, challenging any one of us to face him in a duel. Our troops were there, paralyzed with fear in front of that giant, Goliath. But then, amid all that tension, I decided I was going to face the guy. Yes, me, a young man who didn't look like a warrior in the slightest, without armor, without imposing stature, none of that. But what I had was a faith of sorts, an unwavering trust in the Lord. When I said I was going to face Goliath, you needed to see the look on people's faces. Many people, including King Saul, thought I had lost my mind. A child trying to do a man's job, they thought. But hey, my faith was my shield, and I even refused the king's armor. I knew that my strength didn't come from metal, but from something much greater. There I went, with just my sling and a handful of smooth stones I had picked up from the stream, to face the giant. Goliath, with all that armor and a spear that looked more like a pole, mocked me, laughed in my face. But I wasn't there for a strength competition. I was there to show the power of the God of Israel. You come to me with sword, spear, and shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, I said. And with all the calm that only divine confidence brings, I slung a stone. And wouldn't you know it, it hit right on the giant's forehead. Goliath fell as if he was a tree trunk being chopped down. His fall was more than just an epic moment. It shattered that aura of invincibility the Philistines had, changed everything. Suddenly, the Israelites got a boost of morale, of faith, and charged at the enemies with everything they had. My victory over Goliath wasn't just a personal achievement. It put me in a leadership position before the people and marked me as an instrument of divine will. That's when it hit me. My mission was far beyond what I could imagine. It wasn't just about having physical courage. but about maintaining unwavering faith in the plans of the Most High. And after that day, after Goliath's fall, my life was never the same again. That victory not only put me on the map across all of Israel, but it also opened doors in King Saul's court that I didn't even know existed. And among all the incredible encounters I had, there was one that truly changed the game for me. My connection with Jonathan, Saul's son. Now, you might think that Jonathan would see me as a threat, you know? After all, I was gaining a good deal of influence and popularity, even with his father. But no, Jonathan took a completely different path. He saw me as a soul brother. We had a harmony that went beyond, sharing ideals, courage, and, most importantly, an unwavering faith in the Lord. Our friendship flourished amidst a period full of ups and downs, becoming a true pillar of loyalty and brotherly love, even with all the confusion and intrigues swirling around. What Jonathan did for me was extraordinary. He gave me his own tunic, as well as his bow and belt. This wasn't just an exchange of gifts. It was much more. It was a recognition of my position and a commitment to eternal loyalty. Jonathan, who in theory would be next in line for the throne, chose to support me, acknowledging the anointing I carried. Our friendship became fundamental in my life at the court. Jonathan was my advisor, my protector, and often the bridge between me and Saul, especially when things started to get tense. With Jonathan, I had someone who truly understood the weights and responsibilities that came with my position, and who stood by my side no matter what. But as this unfolded, a shadow began to form within the palace walls. The same Saul, who had welcomed me with open arms, began to change. The problem wasn't an enemy outside, but rather a much more destructive internal poison: jealousy. Saul, whom I served with all respect and loyalty, began to see me as a rival, even though that was never my intention. The songs that people sang, praising my achievements, only fueled the fire of jealousy in Saul's heart. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. That was the refrain, turning all the admiration and respect Saul had for me into suspicion and hostility. Each praise I received was like an arrow striking Saul's pride, making him question his own value and his right to the throne. And then, what was a relationship of camaraderie and trust turned into surveillance and hostility. Saul, caught in his own insecurities, could no longer see God's hand in the victories. He only saw the shadow of his own downfall. Jealousy is indeed a prison, and Saul was there, trapped, unable to be happy for others' success or to see the unity and strength that this brought to the people of Israel. Essentially, each time I did something notable, it was seen as a threat to the throne by Saul. The situation reached a point where, while I was playing the harp trying to calm the atmosphere, something I did willingly and as part of my routine, Saul tried to hit me with his spear. This happened not once, but twice. And only by pure luck, or rather by divine providence, was I able to escape these attacks unscathed. These episodes made one thing very clear: my stay at the court was becoming, let's say, unsustainable. And so began a kind of adventure, I would say, a phase of fleeing and facing challenges, where the only thing I was sure of was the Lord's protection. But even as the danger increased, my faith did not waver in the slightest. I knew I was facing more than just a king who had lost his way. It was a spiritual battle against much greater forces that were trying to divert Israel's destiny. And amid all this turmoil, my conviction was that the true fight belonged to the Lord, and that my victory would not come through weapons or human strength, but through God's unwavering faithfulness. And to add another twist to this entire story, there's the episode of love between me and Michal, Saul's daughter. She appeared in my life like a beam of light in the midst of the darkness that was forming around me. Our love was no secret to anyone, but instead of seeing this as something beautiful, Saul saw an opportunity to put me in more danger. He came to me with a dowry proposal that was anything but ordinary. Saul threw a challenge at me that, in his mind, was essentially a suicide mission: to collect 100 foreskins of Philistines. Yes, that's right. He thought that would send me straight to the grave. But, driven by the love I had for Michal and my unwavering faith in the Lord, I not only accepted this crazy challenge but also doubled the bet, delivering 200 foreskins to the king. That's how I secured my right to marry Michal. Our marriage was a mix of joy and tension. Joy because we were together, but tension because the circumstances were anything but ideal. Michal, this incredible daughter of the king, choosing to stand by my side, showed courage and loyalty that exceeded all expectations. She became my refuge in the midst of the storm, a bond of true love amidst so much mistrust and danger. Despite our marriage being full of love, we did not escape the tragedy of separation and the complications of life at court. Saul's political maneuvers, which reached the point of giving Michal in marriage to another man during my flight, were clear attempts to cut the ties that bound me to his family. Saul, who was already losing his mind with jealousy and resentment, went so far as to order my own friends and even his son Jonathan to end me. But oh, here comes the incredible part of the story. The loyalty and justice of these guys, especially Jonathan. Jonathan was a true brother. He stood up to his own father, defended my innocence, and spoke of the good I had done for Israel. For a while, it seemed like things were going to calm down, because Saul swore he wouldn't try anything against me anymore. But the peace was fleeting. The darkness in Saul's heart was like a black hole, not letting anything good last for too long. His attempts to catch me got smarter and more dangerous. I lived in constant tension, jumping from one hiding place to another, while Saul sent the entire army after me. In one of these tight spots, Michal, my wife, helped me escape from an ambush that Saul had set up. This, of course, cost us our cohabitation but saved my life. In my flight, I ended up in Nob, where a priest named Ahimelech gave me a hand, arranged food for me, and even the sword of Goliath. The problem is that Saul found out about this act of kindness and, man, his reaction was brutal. He ordered the execution of Ahimelech and all the priests of Nob. This episode was a shock to me. It marked me deeply and only reinforced my determination to move forward, maintaining faith and fighting for what is right. Yeah, life at that time was a real roller coaster. Just imagine, there I was, fleeing through the desert, hiding in caves. But it wasn't just about surviving. This was a time of enormous growth for me, both personally and spiritually. I learned to trust in the Lord in ways I had never thought possible before, realizing how He was guiding me through hardships and preparing me for the future He had planned for me. And look, amid the chaos, when everything seemed as unstable as desert sand, something incredible happened. From being a lone guy trying not to get caught, I became the leader of an ever-growing group. These people, each with their own story of hardship and despair, saw something in me that made them want to join my cause. They came to the cave of Adullam, which became a sort of headquarters for those on the margins of society under Saul's reign. The situation was this: about 400 men, all in debt, discontented, or simply in trouble, joined together not by blood ties, but by a common desire for justice, a better life, and faith in me as their leader. This band of lost souls quickly transformed into a formidable force. Under my leadership, these guys became more than just a disorganized group. We formed a united community, a true family of warriors dedicated to something greater than ourselves. Together, we faced not only the hardships of the desert, but also the challenges from those who wanted to see us fail. The guy who became famous for defeating Goliath, a Philistine, ended up having to seek refuge precisely among the Philistines, my former enemies. All because Saul's persecution was becoming increasingly intense, forcing me to make the kind of decisions that many would find unthinkable. It was a move of desperation, trying to ensure not just my survival but that of my entire troop. When I went to speak with Achish, the king of Gath, I was well aware of the risks. My reputation as the guy who took down the Philistines followed me, and the story of Goliath was still fresh in their minds. But using my wits and trust in my skills of diplomacy and cunning, I managed to make Achish believe that I had switched sides, feigning desertion and presenting myself as an exile persecuted by Saul. I promised my sword and those of my men in exchange for his protection. And Achish, seeing a chance to use me to his advantage, gave me Ziklag as a base. This place not only became our refuge but also a strategic position. There, I set up a safe haven for my family and followers, far from Saul's clutches. However, maintaining my position and the Philistine king's trust required me to perform a real diplomatic juggling act, a delicate dance of cunning and dissimulation. It was a time of great tension, but also of much learning about how to play the power game without losing my essence. Instead of attacking Israel's allies, as I made Achish think, my group and I focused on the real villains of the story, the enemies of God, like the Amalekites and other groups that weren't exactly fans of our people. This not only earned me a good standing with those folks, but also meant I was indirectly helping Israel, even from afar. Of course, I kept my real agenda in the dark, letting Achish believe that I had turned my coat against my own people. Then, news came that was like an earthquake to me. Saul and his sons, including my heart brother Jonathan, had fallen in battle. This happened in a nasty fight at Gilboa against the Philistines. Saul, seeing that defeat was certain and wanting to avoid the dishonor of being captured, took his own life. And his sons, including Jonathan, fought valiantly to the end. The loss of Jonathan hit me deep. He was more than a friend. He was a brother to me, and the news of his death left me devastated, but also made me want to honor everything he stood for. Saul's death closed a very tense chapter in the history of Israel and in my life as well. But, as paradoxical as it may seem, it also paved the way for the promises God had made to me to begin to be fulfilled. It all came with a heavy weight of mourning for those we lost and a gigantic responsibility on my shoulders. It was important to me to show respect for the Lord's anointed king and for my fellow countrymen, even those who saw me as an adversary. This period of mourning was a way for me to demonstrate my loyalty and compassion. With Saul's departure, my path to leadership took a new direction, finally aligning with the promises made by God years earlier. Ascending to the throne wasn't a matter of personal ambition, but rather a response to divine guidance and the recognition of the people of Judah, who saw me as the right man to lead Israel in the face of the challenges to come. I was anointed king in Hebron, a place that was not chosen at random. After seeking direction from the Lord, it was clear that was where I should go. Hebron holds significant historical and spiritual importance for our people, and it was there that my journey as king began. This anointing in Hebron meant not only recognition of my leadership, but also reaffirmed God's faithfulness to his promises. My ascent to the throne was a joyous moment for many, but it also marked the beginning of a period of transition and challenges. The kingdom was divided, with the north still loyal to Saul's house, while I took the throne of the south in Judah. This division reflected the complicated dynamics of power and the broken loyalties within Israel, a maze I needed to navigate with great tact. As king of Judah, my priority was to establish a reign based on justice, mercy, and loyalty to God. My leadership was shaped not only by battles against external enemies or by fleeing from Saul's persecution, but also by a solid foundation of humility and dependence on God, which had always been the cornerstone of my strength. It was a challenging start to my reign, but also filled with hope and determination to do what was right for the people. I made a pact with Abner. He was the commander of Ishbosheth's army, who was Saul's son and, until that point, essentially my rival in the struggle for control over Israel. Abner was a significant figure, highly respected, and had been super loyal to Saul's house, supporting Ishbosheth after Saul passed away. However, the atmosphere in the northern kingdom was tense, especially between Abner and Ishbosheth. Things got so bad that Abner, feeling undervalued and disrespected by Ishbosheth, decided it was time to switch sides. He came to me, offering his support and the loyalty of the army he commanded, with the condition of being recognized and respected at my court. Abner's move was far from trivial. It represented a real turnaround in Israel's politics, signaling not just the fall of Saul's house, but also the recognition of my leadership as the right choice to unite and command all the tribes. Abner, with all his influence and military know-how, could have been a problem if he continued against me. Instead, he chose to be my ally, bringing the loyalty of those who were still doubtful or faithful to the memory of Saul. Our alliance was cemented in Hebron, where Abner committed to convincing the northern tribes to unite under my leadership. In return, I promised to honor him and give him a prominent position in my government. This agreement was crucial. It marked the beginning of a transition period, smoothing over internal divisions and beginning to unify the kingdom under a single command. Yet, even this move had its dark side, marked by Abner's death at the hands of Joab, which almost threw away the peace we were trying to build. After a series of conflicts and internal disputes, The moment finally arrived when everything began to fall into place for Israel. The northern tribes, which until then had been somewhat hesitant to accept my leadership due to their loyalty to Saul's house, finally relented. They came to Hebron, recognized the anointing God had placed upon me, and pledged their loyalty and support. It was one of those pivotal moments. It held immense spiritual and political significance, marking the end of years of strife and the fulfillment of a promise from on high. With everyone finally on the same side, I decided it was time for an upgrade in our address. I set out to conquer Jerusalem, which until then had been in the hands of the Jebusites. Jerusalem wasn't just any city. It boasted a prime location and enormous spiritual significance, making it the perfect place to be the capital of our now unified kingdom. The conquest of Jerusalem was much more than a military victory. It was living proof of God's blessing on my reign and over Israel. I transformed Jerusalem into the political, religious, and cultural heart of Israel, bringing the Ark of the Covenant to the city. This move to bring the Ark there wasn't just symbolic. It was a way to place the worship of God at the center of our national life. Jerusalem, previously considered an impregnable fortress, fell before our determination and cleverness. Choosing Jerusalem as the capital not only united all the tribes under a centralized government but also reinforced our collective commitment to the covenant between God and His people. With Jerusalem as our capital, I began a series of military campaigns that not only expanded our territory but also secured Israel's safety against troublesome neighbors. It was a period of significant advancement and strengthening for us, marking the beginning of a new era of prosperity and unity under a unified government. However, the time came when I committed one of my greatest mistakes. It all started when I was captivated by the beauty of Bathsheba, who was married to Uriah, one of my most loyal soldiers. I made a terrible choice, arranging for Uriah to be killed in battle to hide the fact that I had been with his wife. The prophet Nathan, sent by God, came to confront me, making me realize the gravity of what I had done. And listen, the cost of this mistake was high, bringing pain and death into my own house, something I will never forget. My family found itself in a whirlwind of disasters. My daughter Tamar was abused by her own brother, Amnon, and I, paralyzed, did nothing to punish him. This ended up creating a deadly hatred in Absalom, Tamar's brother, which resulted in the death of Amnon. This series of tragedies triggered a huge conflict within my family, opening wounds that seemed impossible to close. As if that weren't enough, Absalom, my own son, driven by ambition, decided he wanted the throne for himself and started a rebellion against me, forcing me to flee from Jerusalem, the city I so loved. His betrayal was not just a political blow. It was a direct hit to the heart, a father-son struggle I never wished to face. The death of Absalom, though a victory on the battlefield, left me with an immense void, a pain that time cannot erase. My life had its highs and lows, moments of victory, and decisions that, looking back, directly challenged what God had planned. One of those moments was when, consumed by pride, I decided to take a census of Israel and Judah. At the time, it seemed like a simple decision, but in reality, it was a huge mistake on my part, a lack of faith in God's promise to protect and prosper us. Instead of trusting in Him, I sought security in numbers, a move that did not end well. The response came in the form of a terrible plague that struck Israel, killing 70,000 innocent people. This broke me, seeing the suffering caused by my arrogance. In search of mercy and forgiveness, I bought a plot of land from the Jebusite Araunah to build an altar to the Lord. The plague stopped, but the lesson stayed with me forever. During this time of reflection, I revisited an old dream of mine, to build a temple for the Lord in Jerusalem. But God made it clear that it would not be me, but my son Solomon, who would carry out this work. Nevertheless, I dedicated myself to gathering everything that would be needed, precious materials and skilled craftsmen, so that Solomon would have everything ready when the time came. Aware that my time was running out, I called Solomon and passed on to him all the instructions for leading Israel with wisdom and justice. I advised him to always follow the Lord's ways, so that he might prosper in everything he did. I truly wanted to see Israel flourish under his leadership and prayed that he would build the temple as a permanent home for God's presence. It was a moment of transition, not only marking the end of my journey, but also the beginning of something new with Solomon's reign. The preparation for the construction of the temple was not just an act of devotion, but also a way to ensure that the legacy of faith continued through the generations. My life was kind of a mirror of the internal and external battles that everyone faces, a reminder that, despite our flaws and weaknesses, we are called to pursue God with everything we have. It's about trusting in His mercy and grace to guide us through the confusions and storms of life. My name? David, and this was my journey, the story of a guy who, despite the stumbles, always sought to be aligned with the heart of God.